Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of General Geekery. I am Brian, and as always, with me is JD.
Hello.
And our special guest today is Jim Godfrey.
Hello.
Jim, how are you doing?
I'm all right.
Great. It is awesome to have you. This is a continuation of our month-long spotlight on awesome customizers, and Jim definitely fits that category.
Oh, wow.
This is also my excuse to talk to people whose work I'm a fan of.
Absolutely.
So,
and for the
Glad
third
to be here,
week in
boys.
a row, we have somebody on that's better than both of us put together.
No.
not wrong about that. So, I look, I can paint a little bit, but I can't add the life into the paint job that you do. With a few strokes of paint, you can make a toy look like a real person.
Yeah,
and
the painting is my favorite thing to do, and your paint apps just blow me away.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, guys. Thanks. But I guess, like you've said on this stream before, Brian, this is all about trying to convince people to start customizing themselves, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I always approach it as what I do is it's possible for anyone to do. It's like I see, especially painting, maybe not sculpting, but especially painting, it's more like learning a trade
Absolutely.
than,
I would agree with
than actually having an artistic skill. And that's what people are scared of, but they shouldn't be, because it's all about a process, and you follow that process and you'll get results. You'll need practice, obviously, like anything, but it's, you know, it's not beyond the reach.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you anymore than it. And I've said it on a couple of my, like, when I review my customs, is like, if I can do this, you can do this too, because my stuff was not very good to start out with.
Well,
just by hammering away at it and watching what other people do and asking questions and just being inspired by people like work like yours, and just talking with the people that do awesome customs, it is possible for anybody to do this.
well,
yeah, totally.
I've got one that I inspired here. Come here, you. Come here, Mr. Blake. Here, hold it up.
All right.
No,
Hey, Blake,
here,
how you doing,
close.
buddy?
Get it close.
Good.
Hey, Blake.
Here, don't block the head. Here, wait, here. Hold it by the legs.
There you go.
There
What
you
do you
go.
got
Hold
there,
it up.
Blake?
Close.
My own custom figure.
He painted it.
Really?
Yep. Here.
That's fantastic. What is it?
Yeah, tell him what it is. What's he supposed to be?
A bandit.
There you go.
Bandit. All right.
Yep.
Silver and blue. I like the color scheme. That's great.
That's why he's got the bank robber mask on, right?
Yep.
Yep.
I think you paint better than your dad does, Blake.
Hey, he's not. He might be right. But yeah, he wanted to show it off. So
That's fantastic.
come on.
Starting them young, starting them right. See?
Yep.
It's
Well,
a great hobby for kids too, man.
I did the cutting and gluing because at 41, I still have mishaps, but I handle them better than, so good job, mister. I'm proud of you. Good job.
How old are you, Blake?
8.
8.
Hey, that's a good age to start, mate. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll guarantee you by the time he's JD's age, he's going to be like, people are going to be talking about Blake as one of the top customizers at the time, I'll bet.
Yeah, someday he'll paint better than I do. All the time.
Probably
Like,
tomorrow.
hey. Yeah. Isn't that funny? Yeah. That's,
yeah. It's funny because it's true. Trying to get JD sold on an airbrush. I've got one that I think I can repair.
Good.
And if I can get it repaired, I think JD will inherit it.
I can fix that.
All right.
Okay. He doesn't like the way the elbow bends. I told him I'll fix it. So
right on.
But yeah, he told me the parts he wanted to use, so I cut them apart and I glued them together. So yeah, he painted it. So
Is that his first one then, mate?
mm-hmm. Yep. The first one that he wanted to do more than color on it with crayons. So though he does some of his toys, he's got like crayon stuff. I'm like, what is that? He's like, it's rust or something on it. So, but yeah, this first one where he picked up the paintbrush and decided to create a color scheme and a backstory for it. So, yeah,
right on. Ooh, thunder. All right, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about your customizing process, Jim.
Where do you want to start?
Boy, that's a good question.
Well, here's my thing. You tend to make real elaborate looking customs by cobbling together different sources of stuff. Like if you take a base figure, it's probably going to end up with expanded like you'll have a much different part selection, and you tend to do a lot of like cybernetic limbs and stuff. So what's your process look like when you're Frankensteining a figure together, and how do you decide like do you have to do a dry run with it first, or do you just pick out the parts and make it work by magic?
Yeah, I spent hours doing the dry fit, going through parts, getting all the tubs out. It's a nice process because something you can do while you're doing something else in it. You can sit and watch a game on TV, or you don't really need a lot of concentration. It's the playing aspect of customizing that I find that bit is where you're just messing around with bits, trying this out, trying that out. Sometimes carving up pieces and realize, oops, I'll never use that again. But it's you've got to try it, haven't you? You've got to try it sometimes. Sometimes you just have to dive in. You go, I'm gonna cut this up if I do this to this piece. And it's like, I'll risk it. And sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. But we've all got tons of fodder, haven't we?
Yes, absolutely. What got you customizing, Jim?
It was kind of the podcasts, really. I hadn't been into toys since I was a kid, and I listened to a lot of podcasts. And so one day I decided to look up if there was anyone talking about G.I. Joe on any podcast anywhere in the world. And I came across like the Full Force and Flag Points and Joe Berg and Joe Customs, and the passion those guys had for the toys at the time. It just dragged me along. I didn't realize there was such great new G.I. Joe toys out. It was the era of the 35th and the POC.
Is my favorite.
Man, some of those Vipers just blew me away. It was like, oh my God, I've got to get my hands on these.
Man, I kind of admire the discovery of that. Like the sudden realization that these things are out there. I can't even imagine seeing them for the first time, and it's just a fresh thing. That's pretty cool.
Mate, it was great because I've been in a fandom, like a G.I. Joe fandom of one for like 25 years, 30 years.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't know about any of the forums or any of that. And so it was exciting to find out about it. And I wanted to get my hands on these things, and then realize that, being in the UK, they're not in toy shops. Getting them shipped over, you're going to pay twice as much. And it was like, oh, well, forget about it. And then I saw customs. I didn't know people customize figures. And so I started looking for just fodder pieces, fodder parts, and found a load on eBay. And that's where I started, because I'd had a basis in miniature painting when I was a kid, in my early teens. I was into tabletop wargaming a lot.
Oh, okay.
But I'd sort of left all that behind. I wasn't a great painter by any stretch. It wasn't like I just rediscovered my skills. It was like, but I thought, well, I used to do that. Maybe I could do this again.
Definitely.
And what got me really going was all the YouTube tutorials. Not just the figure tutorials, but the miniature painting, the sort of bust painting. It was not long after our kid had been born. He used to have like 3-hour naps, but he'd only nap on someone. So it gave me 3 hours free to just sit with a laptop next to me and just watch tutorial with the headphones on.
Oh, that's cool.
And so before I even started my first figure, I was like, right, this is the process I need to do. So I thought, good basis, good foundation. rather than just flying in there. I thought I'm gonna see what the experts say first.
Yeah, no, I think we're living in a like golden age of information where this stuff is just readily available. I mean, the internet was obviously a thing when JD and I both started doing this, and there were resources, but not like there is today. I mean, there's just channels and channels of YouTube and the groups on Facebook. I think for those people that are starting out in customizing, this is a good time to do it because there are
it's great
resources out there.
Yeah. When I started this, Star Wars Power of the Force 2 was in stores, and the Star Wars websites that I could find were like T-Bone Fender and Rebel Scum, but it wasn't even Rebel Scum yet. It was Philip Wise's collecting site at Wiseacres. That was his domain name. It wasn't Rebel Scum for like 2 years after I started surfing it. And I found a customs group called the Ferg, FFURG. And there's a whole customs ring. Remember when there used to be rings for the websites where somebody would, you'd find a group of websites with common interests? Well, that's what it was. And I'm looking at Star Wars customs. I'm like, oh, this stuff is interesting. And I remember what inspired me to do them was Shadows of the Empire. But what first inspired me to say, wait a minute, this could be a thing, was somebody had taken a Power of the Force 2 TIE pilot and the Lando Calrissian head and put Lando's head on the TIE pilot body. And they'd made a jacket or something and turned him into Biggs Darklighter from the deleted scene at the beginning of Star Wars with the white jacket and the cape. And I'm like, somebody made a Biggs custom. It was the first one I'd ever seen. I don't know if it's the first one somebody ever made, but it was certainly the first one I'd seen, especially in that outfit. And then a couple of months later, when I was at the store and I found the Shadows of the Empire figures, I think I mentioned when Mike was on, it bothered me that we had Luke in the guard uniform, but not Lando. So that's where I started. But it was that Biggs custom, and then there was a Chewbacca that somebody had done where they'd taken like a 12-inch figure and put real fur on it. I knew that was too complicated, but I'm like, wait, this is a thing people do. And so the internet was still in its infancy, but I can't imagine starting this and having anywhere near the volume of information that's out there now. It's fascinating.
And mate, when I think Brian talked about this with Panama, it's like back in the day when I used to paint miniatures, like people didn't want to give away their secrets at all.
Yeah,
it was everything was a guarded secret, and it's completely inverted now, isn't it? It's like the currency now is It's like you can be a great painter now, and the people that actually sort of get the interest and get the following, and there are the people that do the actual tutorials. It's like it doesn't matter really about your quality so much as what you can give back to the community nowadays.
Yeah, which I really like how that's like changed 180 degrees from how I started, how it was when I started. Because most of the really good people at the time would not give up their secrets. I mean, there was one person that I really admired and really loved his customs and would talk about how he did stuff was Dave Anthony. And he does hyper realistic customs and
True Grid, right?
I don't remember what his screen name was. That doesn't sound right. I think it was just Dave Anthony. I think that's just what he went by, even on the words. But he's definitely one of the guys that really was instrumental in saying, this is how I did this, and you learn from people like that, and then it's like somebody asks you, and it's like, okay, somebody told me how to do this, so it's my turn to pass that information on.
Oh, yeah, totally. It feels good as well, sort of passing even it's just a couple of tips onto somebody. Absolutely. And they use it. It feels great. And also, it's the same with any skill, isn't it? If you're teaching somebody something, it becomes ingrained more solidly within you, the actual process. The best way to learn is to teach, isn't it?
It is. I won't disagree with that at all. I do a lot of teaching as part of my job, and yeah, it's definitely, I've noticed an improvement of what I do just because I teach it. Somebody once told me you don't really learn something until you have to teach it.
Yeah, because you have to nail it perfectly to pass that on in a sort of in a way that people can understand. And when you do that, it organizes that process in your brain for yourself, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what is one of your favorite things to customize then?
Well, in terms of what, scale or style or?
Oh, pick one. Let's talk about it all.
God, I go through all the scales. I mean, that's you see on camera, that's like, so that's the
Wow.
That's a miniature scale, which I don't know, it must be about 1 to 40.
42nd maybe?
Yeah, around there.
48 maybe.
Warhammer 40K. And then now let's go for, and obviously our favorite 1 to 18th.
Nice. Look at that.
Who makes that Jeep?
It's the World Peacekeepers one.
Oh wow. Okay.
Jeez.
Is that a modified? That is a modified Duke backpack hanging off the side of the.
Probably somewhere.
It looks like you added.
Yeah.
It looks like you added a canteen and
man.
something else to it. That's cool. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like the extra. I like the dashboard mounted saw machine guns.
Oh yeah, the twin GPMGs or the.
Yeah, that's sweet.
FN mags. I built a little. Scratch built a little twin mounted.
That is cool.
So it belts and
Awesome. I would never have guessed that was the World Peacekeeper.
No, neither would I. That's why I was curious.
I was like, I bet that's 21st century, but
See,
nope.
Mate, it's such a good sculpt. It looks basic.
well, that's
When you look at it close up, it's like the proportions are perfect.
well, and see, but that's what a paint job can do. Because honestly, I knew that you had done the paint job, but I figured maybe it had already been a decent thing that maybe it upgraded the paint on. But the World Peacekeeper stuff, as cool as it looks, it has no realism to it.
No, it does not.
So basically, you started from zero with the lack of any paint job, any paint work that it probably had on it, and you made it look like a high-end collectible. Because I was figuring it was 21st century or some other even more obscure, collectibles line that maybe you'd adapted it to work with the figures. But I'm impressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a nice mold that. And then, like recently, as in like sort of 12 months, I've been doing 1 to 6, which is I absolutely love this scale.
Yeah, I love that Major Blood.
Yeah, that's Major Blood in his Australian SAS CQB outfit.
I am fascinated by that custom. I've stared at it many, many, many times.
Yep.
I love that so much.
Got a couple of alt heads for him that screaming camo queen.
Nice.
That's about right, dude. I mean, the paint you put on his teeth.
Yeah, right.
Wow. Yeah, dude. I mean,
man,
you could have a dentist work on those. Like it's the realism that you get into your paint job. I don't know how you do it. My faces. Brian always criticizes the aesthetics of the Fortnite line. I love the Fortnite line.
Oh man, I went to Toy Shop recently. They're gorgeous, aren't they?
Yeah, I love them. But the way the faces tend to be a little bit cartoony, that's how I paint faces. That's my level of skill when it comes to painting faces. The figure that I sent a picture of to Brian the other day, it was a Marauder head that I did some paint work on, and it looked pretty good. Then I took the picture. I'm like, wow, that just looks like shit. But I'm like, well, yeah, that's. Then I look at your stuff and I'm like, I can't even get a 1/10 of that kind of realism into my paint jobs. I can't. I don't know.
But it's it's we're all working off the same sculpt. That's the thing.
Yeah, but you add life into it. Like it looks, the realism, like it looks like it could be based on a real person because you painted it so it reminds me of a few years ago on Facebook. I saw somebody had taken like the Mattel Justice League figures, like Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, taking the basic Mattel figures and completely repainted them and gave them all kinds of life and showed that, well, the sculpts weren't bad. They actually did look like the actors, but the crap paint job from the factory made it look real cartoony and kiddified, but they actually weren't. The sculpts were actually intricate. And when I look at those major bloodheads that you painted, I'm like, yeah, same thing. And I simply do not have the skill set for it.
Yeah, but you do, JD, really. All you've got to do is follow a few sort of basic principles to sort of start improving your own painting. It's like, do you use a wet palette?
Sure.
That face says no.
No, sure, I guess. I have no idea what that means, but plus sometimes it's a patience thing with me, and sometimes it's an attention span problem. I don't have one, so sometimes I just get a custom done and I'm like, okay, as much as I wish I could do more with that, no, it's not happening. So no, what's a wet palette? Do explain.
So basically a wet palette is like, it's essentially you have a flat sponge and sat in what's essentially like a Tupperware lid.
No.
And you soak it with water, and then you get, the baking parchment paper.
Yeah.
Then you cut a piece that fits on that sponge. So essentially, when you're using your paint, you're going to take the paint out of the pot, and you're going to thin it down on top of that parchment paper. And that is going to, through sort of capillary action, it's going to soak up moisture while it's sat on there. So your paint is going to stay constantly thin.
Okay.
And when you start using real thin coats like that, that's when you start to get really smooth finishes.
Well, because I do use a lot of thin coats, but it's brush, water, paint, brush, water, paint, on figure, clean brush off, new water, new paint, water it down, keep painting. I at no point has Tupperware or a sponge ever entered into my hobby. I didn't even realize that was a thing that people did.
I've heard of it.
It'll change your life. It'll change your life.
Yeah,
it's already changed my life, and I've never tried it before. But that's
and another. I guess another tip is when you're painting. Say you're painting a skin tone on a face. Do you sort of constantly work one bit of it, or do you paint and then move to the next bit and let it dry, or are you sort of constantly sort of going over the same bit?
It depends. It depends on my mood and patience level right then, but chances are usually when I get done with a spot, I just move on to the next spot.
Okay, that's good. That's what you want.
And see, that was a trick that I learned using Tamiya paints, because if you start using that paint and then try and paint over it, it just like smears and thins out and then gets clumpy, and you've got to let it dry if you're using it.
Well, I do, but I mean the problem is I let it dry, and usually I get the second coat, and if it's being particularly uncooperative, it'll get like a third coat to make sure I got coverage. And honestly, once it's got the coverage, a lot of times I'm just like, okay, next part then. I made a custom of the 1990. It's a modern version of the 1997 Duke, the version from the Toys R Us set that nobody cares about except for me. And when I sent the picture to Brian, he's like, "Did you paint the eyes?" I'm like, "No, I painted around the eyes very carefully." I mean, it's a Hasbro head, but I painted the face and the arms to match because they were like 4 different skin tones. But I'm like, no. And then when I sent it to him, he's like, do a wash on the shirt, which I did, which I don't know if it shows up that well on the camera or not, but it's just enough to give the definition. But yeah, it's just a version of Duke that nobody but me likes. And it's kind of one that I'm fascinated by. But you'll notice I gave him proper blonde hair and not brown hair. I remember being 8 years old and I got the Tiger Force Duke, and the brown hair, the mystery brown hair for no apparent reason bothered me so much that I had my mother repaint it with her craft paints over so he had the blonde hair. And I'm like, I was painting that last week and I'm like, 30 some odd years later, and it still bothers me just as much. It's just I'm doing the painting now. But yeah, I can't. Yeah, like I called the face done after I painted around the eyes successfully and I got the eyebrows, and I'm like, okay, well, that's enough of that. I can't imagine going over it again. I'm impressed. So
I think one of the questions everybody asks is what kind of paint that you like. I mean, I get that one all the time. So what brands of paint do you like to use?
I generally stick to Citadel, but just because, I mean, it's a lazy answer, just because there's a Games Workshop in 25 minutes door to door from me. It's nice.
I was going to ask, does it depend on availability of paints, or is it because it's your preferred brand and you don't want to? Is it easily accessible? Because honestly, I'll use any kind of paint that's acrylic. I don't care. All those Walmart craft paints, I've got a bunch of those. And Games Workshop and Vallejo and Army Painter, I've got a little bit of all of them. But I don't care. But yeah, so Games Workshop for you mostly. Are there other brands you use, or do you just stick with those?
I have got some Vallejo Model Air and Vallejo washes, but I mean, they must be like 4 or 5 years old. It's laziness. It's I like Citadel.
Hey, I applaud that. So
a lot of the consistency is fine, and they supply their own lamy and medium, which is the stuff that the paint's made of, so it's easy to thin. And they do an air range now, and they provide the thinner for that. So it's like lots of colors. I quite like the colors. I like muted colors, and they do a nice range of muted colors. So.
Yeah, I started out using the Testors Model Master like everybody else that I knew, because that's what everybody else was using at the time. And that was one of the first questions that I asked, like some of the really nice customizers, what paints are you using? And the consensus was Citadel paint. So that's what made me switch to it. And that's definitely like one of the things that I really like about Citadel is their versatility. It's a paint that thins really easily. So they have their own washes and they're very nice, but you can pretty much make a wash out of any color that they have by just thinning it out with a little bit of water or some Airbrush flow improver. I found works as a real nice medium to thin paints out to use to make your own washes. But it's still at the same time, it's thick enough that if you let it sit in the brush for about 10 minutes, it becomes a nice dry brushing paint as well. It's a very versatile paint line for anybody that's just starting out. You're going to spend more than you would if you were buying Model Masters, but when you start using that stuff and start seeing the versatility of it, you'll see where that extra, $1 or $1.50 went, and it won't dry out in the pots like the Model Master. I've thrown away so much Model Master paint over the years when I first started that I absolutely detest the stuff. I won't use it unless there is a color that they make that no one else does. And at this point in time, that only color is like a metallic pearl purple is the only thing I've not been able to find somewhere else.
I just wish Citadel did them in dropper bottles. I hate the style of pot that Citadel use. They have that little tab on that's supposed to, you can open it and keep the lid open, but it's finagly and all the paint. And
it's supposed to stay open, but some of them they don't, because the little folding piece it's too so it keeps closing anyway. So you got to put the figure down to open it back up, get more paint out. Dropper bottles are a nifty idea until you use them a few times and then they get clogged up. I have that problem.
Yeah,
all the time.
we got a dental pick to clean out the dropper bottles.
Well, fancy for you, sir.
Yeah,
Your resourcefulness knows no bounds.
advice is that come, my friend.
Yeah, but see, you've got dedicated processes and things. Sometimes I feel like I'm still making it up as I go, but
sometimes that's not a bad idea either. I do that too.
I was watching some of your tutorials, Brian, and we have a very similar approach to the process. I think we go for base. It's kind of the standard base, wash. I go for base again and then highlight. But yeah, we especially at 1 to 18, we do have a very similar style.
Yeah, and that's what I've tried to impart to people is it looks complex, but it really isn't.
No, it's not, is it?
For the stuff that I do, I mean, for base coats right now, I use an airbrush, and people are kind of scared by airbrush as airbrush thinning. Yeah, but I've got a nice little tutorial on the stuff, how to thin airbrush paints, and I use the same formula all the time. Sometimes I get a little too thin, sometimes not thin enough, but it's something that you learn pretty quickly. And then I spray my base coat on. That's about all I do with an airbrush. I'm just starting to do a little fancier stuff with it. Doing this as a commission for a buddy of mine that was private military contractor in Afghanistan for a long time after he got out of the military.
Nice. Does he know you're making it for him?
Yeah, no, he requested it. It's a commission for him. Just finished up the water slide decal tattoos on it today. It looks like that's going to work. But that's all I used an airbrush for, is because it does very nice, light, thin, and even coats. And for somebody that doesn't have patience like JD does for painting, the airbrush is the way to go, because I spend what would take me, to put a base coat down on this figure would have taken me a couple of hours. It took me a couple of minutes.
Yeah. I love the airbrushing. I only just got back into it. When I first started, I bought one, but I bought one of those cheap Chinese ones, and it was just constantly clogging, and I was constantly stripping it and cleaning it. I couldn't be arsed with it anymore. And I've recently bought an Iwata.
That's right.
But, oh my God, it's so nice using it.
I want a Neo, and that's the other one.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, and it's fantastic, and I'm telling you, JD, we get this other one fixed while you're out here, and it's yours. But especially for someone that does not have the patience like you do, you will be amazed at how much time that you save.
I used to have a lot more patience for painting than I do now. I mean, if I'm in the right mindset, if I'm in the right mood for it, I've got all the patience for it. And then sometimes there's some days where it's just like, not today, Satan. Then I look at the paints and I'm like, also, no, not you either. So yeah, okay, I've got stretches of days where nothing happens with my customs, but
you have a little dedicated spot where you can go work on it?
Yes, dedicated spot, yes. It is not organized. It is, well, a small disaster, but that's
mine's a large disaster. You saw it last time you were here.
Yeah, mine is a lot like that, but in a smaller space. But yes, I do have a dedicated space for it. So yeah, and then like the other day, I had lots of patience for the painting, but could not get the paint to cooperate, really couldn't get it to cooperate. And after an hour, I'm just like, well, paint, we had a good run. I'm done with you today. And that was enough of that.
Yeah. You got to get used to that if you're starting out and customizing anybody. You've got some days it all turns to shit, doesn't it?
Yep. But after 20 years of doing this, I'm just like, some days it's like, all right, I'm gonna finish this custom, and some days it's like, All right, where are the magic elves that are going to come out and finish this damn thing for me?
Definitely one of the
Because-
things that I don't think that I've touched on that I would really like to impart upon people is like the customs that you see from us are the good ones. We only put up the stuff that turns out nice.
And I only put up the ones that I finish.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Sometimes I don't do those either. I don't put those up either. But
So, I mean, when JD was here, he saw I had a whole baker's rack full of customs that
didn't turn out, or he
didn't
started, or
turn out, or they didn't finish, or I just like got hung up. It's like you only see the stuff that turns out nice. Don't get frustrated when stuff doesn't turn out nice, because they're not all going to turn out perfect.
well,
And as you
sometimes-
progress as well, when you look back on your old stuff, some of it's going to make you cringe, and some of it you just
Yes.
don't want on display. You don't want to see it, put it in a drawer because all you can see are the mistakes and all the
Well-
things that you would do differently now.
and then sometimes it's funny because I'll dig up some of the old customs that I made, and I'll look and I'm like, that was surprisingly good, especially for the time I was doing it. I'm like, why?
I
I'm
came
like,
across
wow,
something-
that turned out really well.
I came across something the other day. It was really old, and I'm like, how did I do that? I don't even remember how I did that. I don't think I could replicate that technique now if I tried.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah, because a couple of my customs that I found when I was going through stuff in the basement, I looked and I'm like, damn, this still holds up. In fact, if I tried to replicate this now by starting over, so I don't know if I'd actually be able to do it. I'm like, all right, well, I'm happy with this one. And then I found another one right underneath in another baggie, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so awful that I sent the picture to Brian. He's like, send it to me, I'll finish it. That was that, whatever the hell that random thing was. And that was in the same,
the Mega Viper.
yeah, the one that you turned into the
I've got it right here.
yeah, I
got it carded the other day.
yeah, it was some random shit that I'd started to put together, and it was awful.
I only added a couple pieces. Most of that's JD's build.
Yeah. And
Really?
then but yeah, it was
I added the vest, I think. And I think I think all I added was the vest and like
whatever that air hose or whatever the hell that thing is across his. But yeah, I think most of that.
Yeah, no,
I think that was me. Yeah,
Okay,
you
enjoy-
definitely put the pouches and stuff on, but
You
Yeah.
enjoy
no,
painting
all
that
that-
yellow.
Yeah, yellow, man. It's airbrush. I've always stayed away from yellow, white, and orange unless I absolutely had to. But I'm here to tell you, airbrush is the way to go on that. I haven't carded this yet. It's going to get carded later today. But I did a barbecue custom based off of a custom that we had from KR Customs, who we had on a last month, I think it was.
yeah.
And he put me onto the right paint to use because I had an idea for the build for a long time, but just never did anything with it. And then KR was on, and he showed us his barbecue custom and told me what color of paint to use, and it just like inspired me. And I'm like, nope, I'm gonna finish that barbecue. And airbrush is the way to go for orange, white, and yellow, man.
I started a yellow figure recently, and it was before I got the airbrush. It was trying to do a modern take on Centurions.
Wow.
Jake Rockwell.
Mm.
But I've been painting this yellow by hand, and it's just like,
Wow, that came out awesome.
Beautiful.
but it's still, it's just, because I've still got the legs to finish, and it's just, I cannot be asked to go through that process again. It's just
I
yellow.
cannot blame you.
That is
Oh.
beautiful. I love it. I'm a
But
big
if you want to finish it, I want to finish it.
I'm a big Centurions fan. I've got
Oh, Max.
I've got Max right here. It's my ultimate goal is to make one of those. I'd like to see your recipe on yours to see what we did there.
That was
I know,
the,
but I'm pretty sure the launcher he has on there came with the Rise of Cobra Firefly figure.
yeah, it did. And the actual base, the body is, oh, these little things come out. Is do you remember that?
Is that the
5
accelerator suit from Rise of Cobra?
No, it's
No.
5 POA what's it, Battle Armor Cobra Commander.
Really?
The
Kinda
one that
like-
came with the his tank?
Yeah.
Holy
yeah.
shit, I
Wow.
wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah, those legs. It was just,
Oh, shit.
it's a very nice sculpt, but it's just like,
Oh
it's a
shit!
shame
I
it's
wouldn't have
5 feet away.
guessed.
Huh.
Huh. Well, I don't know. When you got that much armament and it looks that good, who cares if it articulates?
Exactly. But he's only going to be stood in that sort of vanilla stance.
Yeah, I
anyway.
was gonna say the weapons are the big
Yeah.
the centerpiece there.
Yeah.
Have you seen those ramen toys?
I have.
Centurions?
I have.
Have you gone in for the pre-order?
No, I was going to, but kind of a little low on cash when those came out. So I'm hoping to have some when they do hit retail.
Yeah.
So
I never normally go in on pre-orders, but I love Centurions, and I've just had to get. I've just gone for the Jake Rockwell,
gotcha.
but I want to give that a serious paint job.
Yeah.
I can't wait to. They look lovely, don't they?
That'd be awesome. That'll be beautiful. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. No, I love the Centurions. I think that's a line that never really took off. We were talking about that on one of the other shows. I think it's unfortunately it was a show with a friend of JD's. She was on the show and we lost the episode.
Yeah, we've lost a few episodes over this since we started doing this. So
there's another reason to follow a process, as we've talked about. It's like, I didn't follow my process. I normally edit the episode and then upload it to YouTube, and I should have done that and just saved it for later, and I didn't, and I lost the episode. But
it's a nice conversation as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's gone forever.
Yeah.
I got this Wolverine at Ollie's the other day. The Ollie's bargain outlet, they're only in some parts of the US, but they have a shitload of Marvel Legends figures that they're starting to get. They're these buyouts and things like this. So they have this crazy inventory of older toys. I almost ordered this a few times off Amazon. I'm really glad I didn't because I paid $10 for it, but I'm looking at it and the jeans have all this texture sculpted into them. But I'm like, man, I really want to give it a denim, like a white wash to make it look like proper denim. So I'm thinking about doing that.
We'll give it a blue wash first and then a white highlight, a white dry brush.
Yep.
Go dark and
hate dry brushing, but I'll do it.
What? You hate dry brushing?
Hate dry brushing.
I love dry brushing.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. Do a base coat, do a wash, do dry brushing.
Well, let's put it this way. My dry brushing skills are, well, they're not what I wish they were, but what skills I do have, Brian taught me. But I still hate doing it. But I will, because I'm like, man, this is a really nice sculpt, and I'm like, the paint, the jeans just being a uniform blue. I'm like, yeah, I don't, because they got the seams, the stitching and everything for the seams. And I'm like, man, that could really,
you get a little,
that could really bring out some detail. But yeah, this figure was like $10. I'm like, ooh.
It's funny that you should mention that because I did a tutorial recently about find the details in the sculpt, because a lot of these figures that are out there have just, especially like the Pursuit of Cobra line, they have amazing details in the sculpt that just were not painted by the factory, because those finer details, those finer paint details for factory, increases the price point to the point where it's just not feasible to sell a figure for that price. But yeah, you go look at some of these figures. Even some of the Real American Hero figures have just amazing details sculpted into them that didn't get painted. So look for those details that are in your sculpt and paint those details. That's one of the things that will definitely bring out the awesomeness of not only the figure, but your work too, is painting.
Well, that's what, when I first started customizing it, the decision was between obviously the factory style, the factory finish style, where it's all, kind of a base coat and sort of a semi-gloss finish, and that's it, or going for the sort of more miniature painting style. And it was the fact that these sculpts have got so much detail on that it's just like you just can't leave it. And when you bring it out with the shades and the highlights, it's just like, why would you waste all that gorgeous sculpt?
Right.
just base coat it. It just seems like a travesty.
It does. To me, it does. And then I say that, and then I can't think of the guy's name. I think it's Chad that does Real American Hero customs. That's all he does. And he does like factory paint. And it's beautiful. I mean, it just his applications are just spot on, and it's so crisp. And it's definitely one of the things that I try and say on my podcast or my tutorials is I know a way to do things. I don't know the way to do things. There are so many different ways. There is no wrong way to do this. And I think people get wrapped around the axle thinking that they don't know how to do this and they're doing it wrong. And there is no wrong way. There's just finding your way. And I think that's definitely one of the things that I really want people to understand is if you really want to get into this and you really want to have fun with it, it's just experiment. Yep. Don't necessarily listen to me because I don't know. Like I said, I don't know the way. I know a way. Maybe it doesn't work for you. Maybe the Chad's way works. And I don't remember if that's the guy's name. And I apologize in advance for not remembering that customizer's name. But, I used to have a real good friend on Joe Customs that did like factory paints like that. And they were amazing.
Yeah, some of them really are. Some of them look gorgeous because they do look like they. When people get that smooth paintwork on those factory finish style figures, it looks spectacular. Absolutely. It's when you've got a sort of bobbly, you can tell they've not let the paint dry and it's kind of blotchy and splodgy, and then it's kind of looks, yes, it's not bad, mate, but yeah. you've got to be precise with that style, haven't you? You've got to be really
absolutely
precise.
I liken it to like melted crayon. If your figure looks like you've got melted crayon on it, and most of my first customs did. It looked like I melted crayon on mine because the paint was too thick and I layered it too much, and it didn't hold up like JD said. So yeah, thinning out your paints will make a world of difference. I'm really gonna look into some tutorials on what you're talking about on doing wet pellets, because I've heard of wet pellets, but I've never tried it. So that's
one of them. It's one of them things that seems so simple, and it's just like, well, that's not going to change much, is it? But when you use one, it's like, holy shit, how did I get by without it?
Right? There's so many things like that. It's like, how did I get by without a Dremel? How did I get by without super glue accelerator? How did I get by without an airbrush for so long? And it's a growing process, and I think that's definitely one of the fun and rewarding aspects to this hobby, is because you do see growth in your stuff. And like JD was talking about a couple minutes ago, is finding old customs and going, holy shit, I did that. And then finding an older one and saying, holy shit, I did that.
It's a nice little lesson.
Yeah, well, and then sometimes you pull out customs that you can tell. Like, you remember what you were thinking when you did them, and like you might have a group of customs you did all at once, and you're like, wow, how did these two turn out to be pretty cool? And these three just turned out to be complete duds. What the hell? I know I did them all at the same, like in the same time period. I'm like, I know, because I was on a kick for this one particular, and I'm just like, these two still hold up. These three, I'm going to cannibalize them for parts and reuse those because they're so terrible that I literally can't even. I'm like, I know they were done at the same time. So I'm like, it's weird. I'm not even sure an outside observer could have guessed that the same person did them, because there's such a huge disparity between the quality on them. I'm like, that's
and really I think to me that's there's something fun in that as well, because JD and I have done this before. It's like we hit a wall on this custom and we're like, fuck it, I'm done with this piece of shit. I don't want to see it. I don't want to do anything with it. I've reworked it so many times. I'm sick of it. And then one of us will say, send it to me and I'll finish it. And JD's finished one of my customs that I just like. I love the build. I still do. it's one of my favorite builds that I've ever made, and I couldn't make it fucking work, and it drove me insane. And JD's like, oh, this is awesome. Like, that's shit. And he took it home and he finished.
I'm like, no, it isn't. I'll prove it. But yeah.
I've done that on a couple of JD's customs, and it's fun to collaborate like that.
Yeah. That's one thing that you need when if you're just painting or customizing, is somebody that's kind of your sounding board, and that you can just send some photos to, and they'll send some photos back and send some tips, and they do the same for you. I've got a couple of guys that got Paulie from Joburg.
Yes,
he's one of the guys I'm constantly sort of sending images to, and he gives me great tips. He's an amazing kit builder, an airbrusher and painter.
Nice. And
then a guy over here in the UK that I met through Joe, and it turns out he only lives 40 minutes away. It's like Luke Kofi Bainbridge. He's another incredible customizer.
Oh yeah.
And he's fantastic as sounding board for me, because we've got the same kind of background of Warhammer 40k. And
nice. And see that
that's what you need. You need somebody like that who can just bounce ideas from, and they'll sort of sometimes they'll say, well, do it like this, or try this, and think.
And that's definitely one of the things that I've noticed since I've started doing tutorials, is I have people doing that. People, I have no idea who they are. They're like sending me messages, pictures, and I have one guy that's like, send stuff to my friends, and they're like, yeah, that's awesome. He's like, I don't want that. I want somebody to tell me, yes, no, that works, or try it this way, or, he doesn't want to just hear, yeah, that's cool. He wants to hear, honest critiques. And I think and it's a great way to make friends too.
Well, it is nice to hear great custom,
Sure.
But especially if it's one that you're not entirely certain if it's working, and you need the second set of eyes, because you want somebody that's going to say, wow, what the hell, dude? Or, what the hell's your problem? It looks awesome. You need that too sometimes. It's just, sometimes you're just having an off day. Well, and we run into because Brian and I did that custom challenge, and I can't send the pictures to him, and I can't consult with him. So I got a couple of other people that I'm running ideas by, and I'm just like, I have to, because my progress is slow on them. I have to think, they gave me advice, and they're probably wondering, they probably want an update. So the other day I did send some updates. I'm like, well, it's coming along. It's getting there. I am still working on it. But I got distracted by these other 6 things over here. One of those is probably going to get finished. The other distractions were just those distractions. So yeah, basically.
I think that's a great point, though. It's like, if you're just getting started in this, reach out to some of the customizers that you find inspiring, or like their work, or have a similar style, or that's the style that you'd like to try and emulate. Reach out to those guys. You'll find that most of them are very receptive to helping, and really want to talk about this kind of stuff, because a lot of the times they're in the same boat that you are. They're like pulling their hair out over this one custom, and it's like, I need somebody to bounce ideas off of.
Oh man, we all love talking about this. This is why I'm here with you lads. Never met you before, but it's great to chat about it. Customizers love to talk about it, because we don't meet many of our kind in day-to-day life, do you?
No, not at
So
all.
if you go on the forums and chat to people, they will love it. They'll love passing on tips or critiquing you. It's a great community.
Absolutely, it sure is. And it's definitely improved over the years. So don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask for help, or just make new friends. I mean, this is, I think, like, all of my close friends are customizers. And I think this is a fantastic hobby that people really will enjoy. So I was going to ask, do you seal your work?
Oh yes, I do, but Christ, the amount of cock-ups I've had with trying a new clear coat is, even just like my recent work, I couldn't get hold of my usual clear coat, so I tried something. Went to a hobby shop and tried something else, and a Tamiya one. I thought, oh, You know, a decent brand name should be all right. Was it fuck? Oh my god! It's parts of it have still got a tacky feel to it. Won't dry, and it's just like, but I went ahead and finished it anyway. But it's clear coating is brutal if it goes wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
The last stage. I've done it. I think you mentioned it last week. I've done the same as you, where I've gone to clear coat something, and it was a Humbrol can, and the Humbrol clear coat is in the same can as the Humbrol colors.
Oh, yeah. They actually.
Oh man.
Yeah, give them.
Oh no.
A completed model, a good blast of green.
No.
Yeah, like, it's funny because this is the custom that I did that to. I had it all finished. I'm like, I like it. I like it how it turned out. All this tips and tricks that KR gave to me worked out just like I wanted him to. Took it up to seal it. It was, like 10 o'clock at night.
I pick up my phone. I see a text that says, "Well, fuck," and I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" And I'm like, "It's too late at night for it to be any sort of like interpersonal thing." So I'm like, "Uh-oh, he's customizing," and he ran into. I'm like, "Oh, that sucks."
Yep.
I'm like, "How bad is it?" He's like, "Well, I have to repaint the whole thing." I'm like, "Oh, that bad, huh?" Damn.
So what do you use, Bri? What's your go-to choice?
My go-to choice for primer is the Tamiya. Is like you said, Tamiya. It's a good brand name. I love the paint. I use Tamiya surface primer to start with, and then
I use this. Yep. This is the same one that I started using it when I was at Brian's house last year. So I started using it myself when I.
As ironic as it is going to sound that I don't use tester stuff, it's the stuff that JD's got right there. Because that it gives it it's kind of a semi-gloss coat when it's.
Speaking of which, I need to order some more. So after we do this, I need to order some more. I keep forgetting.
It does. So I mean, it's semi-gloss. I mean, this is. And you can't really see it because of how my lighting is. But if you look at
a little bit, yeah.
I was gonna say he's coated in it, and you can't tell. He's sprayed up and down with it. So, and it's got a slight shine, very very slight, but it's too fine even for the camera to pick it up.
I like matte. I really like matte.
I do too.
Yeah, which is what this mostly, and I'm pretty happy with it. I
used an Armory matte sealant for a long time, but as the years progressed, it kind of had a grainy texture to it that worked really well on my Navy SEAL customs. But when I was doing it doesn't work. It's not an all-around sealant. I haven't found one thing that works excellent for everything.
No, well, it's the eternal sort of challenge finding right.
I used Army paint is kind of a new brand that's out there, and I do like their paints. I do not like their primer because it does not dry on softer plastic, so it remains tacky, and I don't like their sealant.
Well, the primer, it's the same one that Brian used, because again, I tried that primer when I was at his house, and I've been using it ever since. Well, last week I sprayed the primer on the thing. It was from some other toy line. It wasn't a Hasbro line. It wasn't Marauder and anything. And I sprayed it, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll give it like 10 minutes, and I'll go back. This doesn't feel right. Why is it slightly? I'm like, no, not all of it, but I'm like, that's a damn primer. What the hell? I'm like, all right, well, whatever. I'll leave it for another little while, and I'm like, fuck. So I picked it up. So I sanded some of it off, and I'm just like, well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe that part, maybe there was something stuck, maybe it was it wasn't as clean as it needed to be. So I sanded it off and I sprayed. Oh my God. I'm like, what kind of plastic is this? And how did I find the one thing from the toy aisle that this primer was not going to be appropriate for it. I'm like, are you kidding me with this? And then I looked at the brand and I'm like, well, I'm not buying anything else by this toy company again. And I can't say what it is because it's part of the challenge, or was going to be, and may not be part of the challenge. It may turn out to not be, depending on how it goes with me trying to salvage it with the primer that just won't work.
One of the biggest problems I've had with soft plastic is like accessories, but was when I was doing vehicle customs, my Seekers that I did, the tail fins that were on the 30th anniversary Sky Strikers are a real soft plastic, and nothing will stick to those tail fins.
Oh yeah, I remember you texted me saying some customizing my Sky Strikers, and I hate these tail fins. I'm like, why? Having never customized a Sky Striker or even owned one, I didn't really. He's like, the plastic they used on the tail fins is weird, and I'm like, well, none of the paint won't stick. He's like, no, the primer won't stick. I can't see. He's like, these suck. He made it work eventually, but barely enough to photograph them.
Yeah.
The trouble with customizing is you use so many different kinds of plastic on one model. It's sometimes you're going to hit that horrible feeling where it's like it won't work on one bit of the model.
Right. Yeah. No, I had that.
You just can't tell which it's going to be, can you?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, but
absolutely.
I mean, but back to the clear coat, the Humbrol matte acrylic I love it. I really love it.
Okay, I'm gonna look for that right.
I think it's a UK brand, but you might get it in the States. But
I've never heard of it.
Especially when I use it on
brand, but I don't know that I've seen it.
It's almost magic when you spray it on skin tone. It's like a final layer of blending through all the skin tones, and it leaves
Humbrol pink. Okay.
Clear coat. Is it a paint on or is it an aerosol?
Aerosol.
Okay.
Yeah, for skin tone, I love it. It's the best. Absolutely
fantastic. Yeah, no, I've got it pulled up. I'll have to because it's just showing some paint on stuff right now, but I'll do a little research on that a little later, because I really would like to go back to a matte finish on
Brian
my stuff.
Brian, when I was at your house last year, we went to the hobby shop, and there was some weird brand of paint that I bought one color of, and I tried it. And I was not entirely happy with the color itself, because it was one of those things, the color swatch that they have underneath the paint. And sometimes it's like, it's not quite the same color.
Yeah.
But that one weird brand of paint, was that it? That I just
don't know.
The Humbrol, and the packaging, like the bottle design, almost looks like it was that one weird bottle of paint that I bought at your hobby shop.
I don't know. I've never used that brand of paint, quite honestly.
Yeah, I just tried because I like the color in the bottle, and I'm like, man, I hope this comes out kind of. It didn't. I mean, it was okay, but I'm like, it's not the magical color that I had my hopes and dreams invested in.
Boy, there's nothing more disappointing than finding a color of paint that's going to be perfect for what you want, and then putting it on and going, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah. Or the label on I'm like, nope, that's different than.
Well, it's amazing what kind of the color of an undercoat can do to the top coat.
That's also a good point too.
Yeah.
And change it drastically.
That's a very good points why I primer everything, because I painted in high school, and we on canvas, so everything was that kind of 15% gray. So that's how I learned to paint, and painting on primered figures is like painting on canvas, because it's a little darker than 15% gray, but it's pretty close to it. But
so I'll be right back. You can keep the recording going. I'll be right back.
All right. But, one of the customizers that I'm friends with actually in the UK likes to primer his stuff like black, and then like dry brush on his colors, and it gives it a real unique look to it. and not very many people do that. And I think it's not how I would do it, obviously, but like I said, it's how I do things isn't the way to do things. It's a way to do things, just as his is, and it has a really neat effect. I think it's
I think a black undercoat is a nice, if you want sort of very muted finish, it's the best way to go. The trouble with doing black as an undercoat is it's hard to see detail.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do black and then dry brush white, so like a zenithal effect. So you sort of just hitting all the high points, and it's like, so you still get that black in the recesses.
Yeah.
But the highlight, but all the detail becomes highlighted and easy to see. It's not a bad approach.
Yeah, and I think that's just one of those things that, you know, you see what other people do, and you're like, I don't know, but it's something good to have. You know, it's like a skill to put in. I don't know whether word to use, but like your armory of skills. You know, it's like all these knowledge base that you have. It's great to have this knowledge, and it's like, because there's going to be one time you're going to be like, I really want this dark, and I really want the highlight, and it's like, hey, you know what? If I primer that black and dry brush it, that's what's going to be my effect.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people do that with the miniatures. Black, because then you don't have to get into, all you're really painting then is kind of the highlighted areas, and all the black bits look like a deep shadow. And it's like, especially at that scale, it's like you want to exaggerate highlights and shadows. And I guess that's one thing that people don't always understand, is like the lower in scale you go, the more you need to exaggerate, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point too. I haven't thought of that. I've only done a couple of miniatures. JD sent a couple to me to do as a challenge, and I only ended up doing one, just because I'm not used to the scale. And he sent me weird stuff that I'm like, I don't even know what to do with this. But he sent me like a human crocodile kind of thing, and I did something. And yeah, you definitely have to be aware of the scale of, you know, how things look. And
it was a good point. When I started the 1 to 6 stuff, it was like that in reverse as well. I started like trying to paint faces the same as I did to 1 to 18th, and it was like, and it just looked too stark, and you've kind of got to, I don't know, pull back from the sort of shadows a little bit, and you'll find that it's like the techniques that you use for one scale won't always work on another, and it's
that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. So
it's hard because you're so used to a standard. Wow, I'll layer this in wash, and then I'll try that on a 1 to 6 face, and it looks like, ugh, what the hell have I done?
Yeah. So when you do like flesh tones, what do you do do you do like an undercoat and then layer it, or how do you like to do your skin tones?
I tend to go in with a light brown sort of undercoat, and then base coat of sort of a dark, what's the name of it in Citadel? It's called Bugman's Glow. It's kind of like a sort of light maroon.
Okay.
So do the whole thing. So basically you're working down from the darker shades up to the lighter shades. This was,
oh, nice.
This is the most recent one I used with that technique. So you go Bugman's Glow, and then you go for a lighter skin tone on the highlights, or the high areas. And then you mix the two together, and then you sort of do in between. It's like hard to explain. It's
nice. That's kind of fantastic. I love it, man. Yeah, that is awesome.
Oh.
So what are you working on there?
That's the alternate head for most recent thing I made with 1 to 12 Space Marine.
Yes, I saw that the other day.
So this head was the kind of a classic 40k veteran, but often the captain or the sergeant. That's sort of a classic look with the bionic eye and the service studs in the forehead.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's amazing.
So yeah, it's so So I had to, right, if you get your wet palette, it's skin tones, get your 3 skin tones. So you've got your dark, it's close to maroon, your mid, and then your light. And then in between those, mix a bit of each one. So you've got dark, medium, light, and in between dark and medium, do a little splodge there. And then in between medium and light, do a little splodge there. And then you go back and forth. And because it's thin and it's on the wet palette, it naturally sort of blends together. So you don't get stark transitions. As you start to build it up. Yeah.
That's what I've been having problems with is stark transitions.
Yeah, it's hard to do, but if you do it with very thin paint and you let it dry between each. So yeah.
Yeah. And oddly enough, I did that on I don't know where the head is. But I did that on one of my heads recently. Didn't turn out how I wanted to, but it works for what I want. Is I'll use to get it to dry, I'll use my airbrush and just blow it dry.
Just splash some air. Yeah, I always have a hairdryer on hand now, just to speed that process up. Because when you're using the thinner, like the actual medium thinner, it sort of retards the curing process by quite a lot. So it's like,
yeah,
you get black with a hairdryer and it's like 30 seconds, you're ready to go again. It's good.
That's a good point too. I hadn't thought of that because I've got a hairdryer that I use to soften up the plastics when I want to pull stuff apart. I've been boiling and popping for a long time, but I'd had a lot of my figures get lose some of the paint comes off in the water. You know, if I'm going to customize it, it's not a big deal, but you know, somebody got mad at me for suggesting that to soften up joints on a figure that they had no intention of customizing. It was for their collection, and you know, the paint came off in the water, and they were pretty pissed at me for that. I'm like, no, sorry about that. I customized all my stuff. So, but a hairdryer, yeah, and it's a. I think the hairdryer is a underused customizing tool that people don't. It's amazing what you find out there that really becomes useful in customizing.
Yeah, and I think what helped me when I first started as well is because I'm a carpenter by trade.
Okay,
I've got all the tools that I seem to need. I had already. It was like you don't have to splash out on
nice,
because that's kind of that initial cost where you've got nothing and you start on a new hobby. It's that can be sometimes a bit of a turn off, can't it?
Yeah.
But I already, all sorts of stuff down in the shed. It was like knives, squares, all sorts of adhesives, all sorts of clamps, and it was a big boot.
Yeah, it's amazing what you'll find. What you'll find to for workarounds for problems to get around some of the stuff. And it's like, I need something, I don't know, to hold this, or I need something to take it apart, and then it's. I think that's kind of, to me, it's one of the fun things to do is to try and improvise and adapt and overcome, like I say, in a lot of stuff of trying to get workarounds.
It's a nice feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, when you get it to work, or it's like, okay, that did not work how I wanted it to. So yeah, definitely.
So what would you say your top 3 sort of basic hints or tips that you'd give to somebody, not necessarily starting out, but sort of maybe to wanting to sort of improve their work? What would you sort of?
Boy, that's a good question. Not used to the one getting questioned on the podcast, so
sorry, mate.
No,
our host is gone, taking his place. You're the guest.
Hey, very good. I like that. Don't give up. I think starting out, and even where I am right now, there's definitely times where it's like, no, done, screw it, fuck it. And just if you're having problems, set it aside and work on something else.
Yeah.
I think is one of the big tips that I would use. Find a process that works for you. Would be another one of the big tips that I would give to somebody. It may not be the way I would do it, but that doesn't make a difference. Find what works for you, and don't be afraid to experiment. I think those would be the three big tips that I would have for anybody at any skill level is don't give up. Find a process that works for you and don't be afraid to experiment. What about
They're
you?
like tips for life, bro.
What's
Not
that?
just they're like tips for life, not just customizing.
Yeah, that's yeah. So Jim's asking the questions now, apparently. Jim's
Okay.
hosting the show now. So we've turned to Jim. Jim's got a question for you there, JD.
All right, shoot.
So what are your 3 top tips for anybody? How do we say it? We're not so anybody starting out, but the 3 most, I can't remember how I worded it now, Brian.
Like the 3 biggest useful tips for any customizer of any skill level.
All right. You know what? Great. Customizing or no, hobby related. Customize what you want to customize.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
And let other people customize what they want to customize, and don't criticize. Don't push your expectations off on somebody else, because the fact is they're not going to meet them whether they want to or not. And chances are they don't want to. And chances are they don't want to be criticized for not doing something the way somebody else would have done it. So do what makes you happy. Customize what makes you happy. If you want to customize Imaginext figures, well, customize Imaginext figures. Or if you want to customize garden gnomes, customize garden gnomes. Do whatever you want. Just make yourself happy. I mean, don't be surprised if there's people that if you do have detractors, because Mel Brooks movies, I hate them. I hate all of them that I've ever seen. But in the beginning of History of the World Part 1, there's one scene that I laughed at. The first ever artist. There's a caveman. He does a cave painting, and immediately followed was born the first critic, where another one of the cavemen steps up on the stone table and urinates on the cave painting.
Yeah.
That's it. There's always going to be critics. There's always going to be somebody that has something to say. And there's always going to be people that just don't like what you do or what anybody else does, or sometimes even what they do themselves. Customize what you want and make yourself happy. So that is one of my big pieces of advice, and that goes for the hobby too. I hate gatekeeping.
Yeah.
It's not fair. Let people do things at their skill level and where they're comfortable. So that is a big, let people have their autonomy because you want it. So yeah, that's a big one for me. Another one is experiment with the paint. Experiment with your own process, and do get frustrated, because honestly, you know what? I'm going to quote Yoda in The Last Jedi. Failure is one of the greatest teachers. It really is. Sometimes you fall down on a custom and it's like, well, this is shit. But I'm like, well, but I kind of like the idea of it. Here's the funny thing. This Duke, I'm going to bring it up again. I started this custom 3 years ago. I dug it up last month, or I dug it up a couple months ago, and I'm like, I'm going to finish it. Some of the base color and the pants the pants were already done. I didn't customize that part this year. I customized them 3 years ago. Even being in a box with all my other unfinished customs, the pants survived. I don't know how, but they did. So experiment. And because that custom wasn't going to get finished 3 years ago because I wasn't happy with it. I didn't have a good head for it. I didn't have good arms for it, because when I originally sent the work in progress picture to Brian, it had different arms and different hands. And I said, well, I need to find the arms and hands it did. That's what stopped me last time, but I finished it this time because I had some better parts. So experiment, find what works for you, and then stick with that. And eventually, if you get burned out, well, then try something new. And thirdly, if eBay is turning out to be too expensive for custom father parts, well, if you live in a place that has toy shows or customizing or like conventions and stuff, go see if you can haggle the prices for father, because nothing's worse than looking and seeing a full price custom, a full price figure on eBay that you have to pay astronomical shipping for, knowing full well that you're probably going to tear it up. And I've learned this lesson too. Never throw anything away. You don't, even though that part, even though the rest of that, even though you bought the figure and you used for the head, you never know what actually what else might come in handy later on. And if you have these figures that you bought and you're like, well, this isn't even father, this sucks, I'm never going to use it, you'd be surprised at what will come up later. It's like, you know what? I think I am actually going to use that. I'm working on a couple of customs the other day. Another one that was a salvaged Feld custom, and another one that is deliberately made out of all parts that I didn't think I was going to use and at any other time. But yes, see, it works.
Those are all failed customs. I go through that bag every once in a while, and it's like, ooh.
Yep,
what I need.
Yep, I'm gonna cannibalize these parts off of this other thing. In fact, one of my custom challenges, one of the figures I'm making for Brian, has one part on it that was a part from another custom that just didn't work out. So yeah, whether you're starting out or whether you're just customizing as you regularly do what makes you happy. Don't throw anything out and do experiment. And if you really get stuck, yeah, reach out for help, because you won't have to look very far to find somebody that's more than willing to help.
Absolutely.
And because chances are there's always a chance that they might have a creative block too. And talking to you and talking to other people about it might free up their creative blocks. Sometimes you might inspire them without even realizing it.
Yep, that's happened between JD and I a bunch of times.
So yeah, that's
it's amazing how often a little chat between friends will get your creative juices flowing.
Absolutely.
Yep. I feel like sometimes some of the best ideas or some of the best serendipity moments come out of a complete accident. Somebody mentioned something, or somebody talked about something that they had watched or just when, and sometimes it's like, oh, wait a minute. And then you go check it out. It's like, oh, I like that idea. I like the creative process, because you never know where the inspiration's going to come from or who the inspiration's going to come from. So
yeah, that's a good point. All right, we are about out an hour and a half. As much as JD and I like to keep these things going to like 2.5 hours,
and I do,
and I do too, is we want people to watch these, and the shorter videos seem to get watched more. So it's not that we don't want to talk, it's we want people to watch and enjoy and get the information that we
plus in this case, Jim is in England and they're 64 hours ahead of us for time. No, excuse me. They're 36 hours, unlike Australia, where they're 64 hours ahead of us. It's like Tuesday for you there, right? So I think we've taken up enough of Jim's time in the castle.
Jim, do you have like an Instagram or a Facebook page that you display your customs on?
Yeah, I tend to. Most of my customs are put on Jimmy Godfrey Customs on Instagram.
All right, send me a link to that today through Facebook Messenger. So if you're watching this right now, in the show notes, you will see a link to Jim's work. Please go take a look at that. And
let me mention, I know Jim through G.I. Joeberg, the Facebook group. Okay. We had the G.I. Joeberg guys on, 2 months ago? Yeah, but yeah, I know Jim through there. So find the G.I. Joeberg Facebook page and find inspiration there.
Yeah,
So
it's a good.
Good community there.
Yeah, I'm a member of that page as well. And
yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of good folks over there,
absolutely.
and I've gotten some numerous customs ideas from there.
Yeah, so that's about all we got for this episode. As always, please do that fun social media stuff. Like, share, subscribe, comment below. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned because we still have more customizers to round out this month with.